friends. Today we are going to talk about measuring, and this time measuring liquids. So when we measure in the kitchen for recipes, we usually use a measuring cup. Now we've been practicing with our measuring scoops, and again, these are for measuring dry ingredients like flour, sugar. When we measure liquids, we usually use a measuring cup, and here's why. When we fill it up, it is a lot easier to pour into our bowl if we have a little extra space on top. If we needed a quarter cup of milk, we would fill this to the very tippy top and then have to bring it over to our bowl. And it might spill out as we're moving it over. If we pour into our measuring cup, a quarter cup, it's going to be down here at the bottom, and we'll have an easier time because if the water or the milk sloshes around, it's still going to stay in our container. And most measuring cups have a nice little spout that helps when we pour. It just goes nice and neat into our bowl. We're also still going to be using our measuring spoons for measuring small amounts of liquid. Usually if a recipe calls for vanilla, or some kind of extract, where it's going to be a measuring spoon size. And our measuring cup does not have markings tiny enough for these little bitty measures. So we're still going to use these. All right, a couple of things. When we work with liquids, we have to be really careful pouring. Go slowly, okay? Today, we're going to be pouring out water as we practice measuring from a container, and this one doesn't have a lid on it, so I'm going to have to be really careful when I pour and go slow. There's something else that we need to talk about, and here's your science word for today. Ready for it? Meniscus. Okay, a meniscus is a tiny little, a little kind of like a bubble that forms on the top of the liquid that can kind of be deceiving when we pour and measure liquids. So when you pour, you're going to notice that there is a little darker spot. And when we read the measuring cup, we always want to read from the bottom of that meniscus, okay, or the bottom of that bubble that forms, so that we know that we're getting the correct amount of liquid. It's especially important when baking, when we have to be exact in order for our recipe to turn out correctly. All right, so if I wanted to measure out 2 cups of water, I'm going to take a look at my measuring cup. And do you see the 2-cup measure mark? It's right here. It is this line that goes straight across. So when I measure out 2 cups, I need to make sure that my water level, that bottom of the meniscus, reaches the 2 cups. So sometimes that means that you have to kind of stand back or scooch back and take a look. And I'm going to be practicing with my water. So very slowly, I'm going to start to pour my water into my measuring cup here. And I'm going to stop and I'm going to take a look. And it's always important to do this on a flat table when you look to see if you have a measure, because sometimes if you hold it up, it's not going to be accurate. You might be tipping it a little. So I'm going to show you right where I am now. Let's try and get this in front of the camera. Am I at 2 cups yet? Nope, I have to keep going. So I'm close. So I'm very slowly going to add more water. And as I get close, I'm going to stop. I'm going to go level with my cup, and I see, oh yeah, I hit 2 cups on the mark. And let me see if I can show this to you in our camera. Right, like that. Do you see? Now, it's hard because I'm trying to hold it up there so you can see, and my hand's going a little crooked, but it reaches the exact line at 2 cups. So then I would go ahead and I would add it to my bowl, pouring very slowly. So I make sure that I pour out using the spout. I could pour out this way, but it's going to splash all over. If I pour out so it's going even with my spout, it will go nicely into my bowl. And again, I'm going to go very slowly. and make sure that all of my liquid is out of my measuring cup. Now, the nice thing about this is I have one tool that can measure almost any amount from a half a cup to 4 cups. So unlike our measuring scoops, where I can only measure one amount and I might have to give, if something called for 2 cups of water, I would have to fill this one up twice. I can just use my measuring cup and fill it up to the 2 cup line. All right, let's try, let's try 1.5 cups. And I'll go ahead and I'll show you our 1.5 cups line. Do you see that? It's right here, the longer line. So again, I'm going to take my pitcher and very slowly I am going to pour into my measuring cup. Notice how I'm going slow. I have 2 hands on my pitcher. I'm pouring out of the spout. I'm going to go slowly until I reach what I think is the 2.5 cup measure. I'm going to scooch back and look. Yep, perfect. I'm reading the bottom of that meniscus, or that little line that forms like a bubble almost. And then I'm going to, I'll hold it up and I'll show you. Let's see if we can get this straight. See there? 1.5 cups. Now, let's say that I needed 1 cup of liquid. And I went to, and I took a look and I'm like, ooh, I did too much. Well, sometimes if it's water, we can pour it back into the container that it came from, or we can pour it back down the sink. Same thing with milk. Sometimes, especially if our thing is clean, we might have to pour back into the container of what we're measuring from. So if that's the case, I'm just going to pour a little back until I see that I've poured back enough so that I have 1 cup. You never want to add more to a recipe than what the directions call for. All right. I am at exactly 1 cup. Let's see if I can hold it up for you to see. 1 cup. See how that line is even with my 1 cup measure? All right. And then I very slowly and carefully add that to my bowl. All right. Here's something that I would like to point out is that this measuring cup measures in cups and ounces. So we need to make sure that when we're looking at the markings on here, that we're looking at the correct numbers, okay? Because if I needed 4 cups and you went and you looked and you saw, oh, there's a 4 down here, but that's 4 ounces. 4 cups is over here. And that's a big difference in the amount of liquids that are needed. Another thing that I want to point out is that if you needed 1.25 cup of something, or even a 1/4 cup measure, that's not marked on our measuring cup, okay? Take a look. It starts out at a 1/2 cup, then 2/3, and 3/4 isn't on here, okay? If that's the case and a recipe calls for 1.25, you're going to have to use the lines that aren't marked. And on this case, let's see if I can get it right in the camera. In this case, if you need 1.25 cups, you're going to take a look at the 1 cup line. And then this little hash mark right over here on this side is where your 1.25 cup would be. If you're ever confused, go ahead and ask a grown-up. Some measuring cup, like my measuring cups at home, have the 1/4 cup on it. This one that we're using right now doesn't. All right. Now, the other thing that we need to talk about is measuring tiny amounts of liquid, like teaspoons and tablespoons. Okay. When you do that, you're going to be using the spoons, not the cup. All right. Now, it's very difficult for me to pour this without spilling out. And I don't want any extra to go into my bowl. So if that's the case and you need a tiny amount of milk or water and you're pouring from a large pitcher, always pour over a bowl or a sink, not where you're going to be placing your liquid. Because if extra spills out, you're adding too much to your mix. So I'm going to pour right over my measuring cup so that way if any spills, it's going right into there. I'm going to very carefully add my water, and I'm going to fill it to the top, and then very carefully come over my bowl and add it to my mixture. Okay? Sometimes small amounts call for things like vanilla is something that you might have to measure a small amount of, or peppermint extract. Okay? If that's the case, you might be using a tiny bottle. And again, you're going to very carefully unscrew the top. If I needed a half a teaspoon of peppermint oil, I would, over my measuring cup, not over my bowl, I would pour into it, fill it up all the way, and because this is clear, it's hard to see, but it's all the way to the top of my measuring spoon, and go ahead and add it in. Something else that I want to remind you of is anytime that you're using things like milk or oil or extracts, that as soon as you're done, you put the top on. So that way, if you accidentally bump it and it tips over, it's not going to spill out all over your counter and make a large mess. All right? Good luck.